Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Jonathan Kanevsky, a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon in Los Angeles, is internationally recognized for natural breast reconstruction using advanced fat grafting, explant surgery, and holistic treatment of breast implant illness, otherwise known as BII. Patients seek him globally for his microsurgical precision, implant-free results, and his unique philosophy, surgery as ceremony. This approach treats each procedure as a profound rite of passage, integrating metabolic optimization, lymphatic health, nervous system regulation, detoxification, and psychological reclamation. He is a trusted voice guiding women through implant-related illness to authentic, vibrant embodiment. Dr. Kanevsky is also a data scientist, serial founder, and high-level advisor in medical AI and surgical robotics. He co-founds and scales venture-backed companies developing AI-driven pre-operative planning platforms, computer vision systems for the operating room, and augmented reality patient education tools. That is a lot of really cool things. Dr. Jonathan Kanevsky, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, thank you for having me. I'm honored, man. That's definitely the most rock star introduction I've ever heard. I want to know that guy. Thank you.
Well, it was take number two, to be fair to everybody out there. Take number one is going to get 86. Nobody's going to listen to it because I goofed up your name. I do have to ask you, do you know how to ski?
I do know how to ski.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
you kind of goofed up the way I remember to say your name right. I've been practicing all morning, and I just in my head I said can never ski, and so that's wrong. You can ski, so
I can
I'll have
ski.
to.
Most appropriately be can snowboard sometimes.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, it's not as good of a flow, but man, I really appreciate it. I have to say that when I got the email to potentially host you on the show, I almost didn't open up the email. And I'm certainly glad that I did, but it's such an interesting stigma around plastic surgery. I'm sure you get this all the time. And I saw the subject and I read about you and I'm just like, I don't know why this is relevant to us. We talk about health and fitness and, nutrition and all this stuff. And the more and more I'm so glad I did open the email and vetted out your work. You do things so differently than other people. And it's so important. There's so many people in our industry that deal with this and think about this, and people that have lost weight, people that have changed their appearance and don't feel great about themselves. And like it's way more ubiquitous than we think. We mentioned that you're in Southern California. I'm actually in the Salt Lake Valley, where we have more plastic surgery per capita than anywhere else in the world. So it's definitely an issue. And again, you do things so differently. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I thought I knew a little bit about plastic surgery until diving into your work, and I'm really excited to learn from you today.
Yeah, thank you for answering the call and for exploring the curiosity, and also to going beyond what you might have perceived as kind of the stereotypes and stigmas and things like that, because there is actually so much there and so much to unpack. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're grateful for your amazing work. And I've heard you on other podcasts explain this. And I think it's pretty cool. Can you tell us how you first got interested in plastic surgery and wanted to pursue that for your career?
Sure. So I knew fairly early on in my medical career I wanted to be a surgeon. I've always enjoyed working with my hands. I've been fascinated by science, by anatomy, working with people. So the direction towards medicine surgery was a pretty easy choice. But when I got to choosing surgical specialties, it became a little bit more challenging because I needed to figure out what is it that I want to spend my day doing. And of all the specialties, plastic and reconstructive surgery felt by far the most creative, dynamic, and diverse. It's at the cutting edge of science, and a lot of people don't know this, but the first organ transplant that was ever performed was by a plastic surgeon. Plastic surgery gets a not the best reputation nowadays because of social media and the news and things like that, but that's a very small slice of surgery, which is aesthetic surgery. The entire breadth of plastic and reconstructive surgery includes everything from burns, trauma, reconstruction after cancer, a lot of tissue engineering, hand surgery, reconstruction of the face, and things like that. So it's a very broad specialty, and what drew me to it was the variety. I was fortunate to have some really interesting mentors that were doing things at the cutting edge. And when I first saw the very first time I saw plastic surgery was in my first few days of medical school, and my mentor at that time is a pediatric craniofacial surgeon. So he's basically reconstructing little baby skulls. And when I saw that, I was like, this is incredible. This is something that's within the specialty, and I immediately gravitated towards it and wanted to do that. And then as I spent more time getting interested in the specialty and learning about it, I just learned how broad and vast everything was. And then I got more and more interested in minimally invasive techniques, and that started to trend more and more towards the aesthetic surgery world, where now I do a mix of aesthetic and reconstructive surgery, mostly focused around the breast, but I do volunteer and mission work for kids in other parts of the body and around other parts of the world in the face.
Yeah, well, I remember listening to you and talking about your first surgery. That must have been pretty intense and again very expansive to show that like plastic surgery does include aesthetic things, which is great. That's not a
Mhm.
bad thing, but also so many other things that must have really put that in perspective for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's just a very broad specialty. So it does well with my interests in that I like a lot of variety and different things. So
yeah, got it. When it comes to aesthetics, this is an interesting topic, and like I said, people tell us their goals all the time, and sometimes it's related to weight loss or want to add more muscle, and it is aesthetic related. And we say that's awesome. You should want to look good. That's fine. How are you able to kind of help people along those kind of lines? There's some really blurred lines that you get into with social media, and you want to take on maybe an invasive surgery that can alter your looks. How do you help people approach that?
I think the most important thing is the power of no, and it is as important for a patient to say no as it is for a surgeon. And saying no during consultation really means that it's out of respect for the patient's well-being, that you're understanding what the patient's looking for and whether or not you're a good fit. So that's the first place that I start is this patient a good fit, and how can I help them achieve the result they're looking for? And sometimes that does involve saying, no, I don't think having a procedure is the right option for you. But once we go past that, and if somebody is a good fit for surgery, it's really understanding what their aesthetic goals and outcomes are. Can they achieve the look that they're going for? Is this a right fit for their mind and body? And how do we get there? There's no one right answer in plastic surgery. I say this all the time to my patients. It's about combining the set of tools that we have to get you as close to the desired aesthetic outcome with keeping in mind accepting the risks and potential benefits. Some surgeries can be more invasive than others, but they may get you a better result. So it's about knowing what all the options are and then choosing from there.
I see. Can you maybe give us a few examples of who a yes would be and who a no would be?
Absolutely. So the most common yeses that I encounter in my practice. So somebody who has done their research. It's a very good sign when somebody's either done multiple consultations, has read heavily online, has a really kind of good understanding. They've come to the consultation prepared with an idea of what they're looking for. So research, like understanding what they're getting into. Two is for me, I call it realistic expectations or outcomes. And that's why the consultation is so important because I picture it like we're both basically describing, and a consultation is like an epic dinner party. Like I'm showing up as the chef saying, this is what I think I can make. These are the ingredients I can cook with. This is what I think is possible. And then the patient comes and says, well, these are the tastes that I like. These are the allergies that I have. These are the food. So we're both trying to describe like our perfect meal. And if they're describing like let's say a chocolate souffle that's perfectly baked at a certain temperature, and I'm like, actually, I can't do that. I can't make that souffle. And I'm just using the cooking analogy, but basically having a very good description of outcomes and realistic expectations and having a conversation about them helps me understand that we're on the same page. If we're really off the mark, if a patient's looking for something that I don't think is realistic or I can't provide, I will either refer them to somebody who I think is better, or I'll say, sorry, I just don't think it's possible. So realistic outcomes expectations is another really important one. Other things that are a big yes are just in general medical conditions. So if you're healthy, no major no major medical conditions, and it doesn't mean having on medication or sick is a no. It's just other things need to be investigated to make sure that you're a good candidate for surgery. Um, so realistic expectations, being well researched, being a good medical candidate, and then I think finally timing and mindset. So somebody who is not, like it's not like I want to do surgery tomorrow or this has to happen tomorrow. It's understanding that there's a process and a timing, and also with mindset goes like I'm doing the surgery ultimately for me. Not for somebody else, not for a very specific outcome, like, oh, I have to get this job, so I need the surgery done. You know, somebody who's been on this arc of saying like I want to reclaim this part of my body, or this is a part that I'm fairly confident and strong who I am as a person, and I think this would be like a tweak that could really help me unlock this next level of either my training or body awareness or body appearance. Those are yeses. The no's are a little bit more straightforward. But ultimately, it's been almost a decade I've been in practice now, and I really go based on my intuition, my gut. If I have a feeling that something's off, I listen to it strongly, as well as I'll listen to the opinions of my staff. But usually, other red flags or no's are somebody who is seeking a second, third, fourth operation for the same area and not getting the desired result. That usually means it's more surgery is not the answer. Somebody who's not a good medical candidate. So it's like a lot of serious what we call comorbidities, but like a lot of illnesses and things that make you not safe for surgery. Usually, elective surgery is not a good idea unless you're fully medically optimized, like healthy for surgery. And then ultimately, if you're doing surgery to try and please or for somebody else, whether it's for a partner, so sometimes somebody will come in and say, oh, my boyfriend, husband, wife really wants me to get this. We'll sit and have a conversation about it because it's usually not a great sign for your ultimate outcome and well-being if you're doing something as invasive as surgery to try and please somebody.
Interesting. That's very, very well explained. Do you
Yeah,
notice that same kind of standard with other plastic surgeons that do what you do, or do you just kind of have your own standard and leave that up to them, whatever they want?
I just there's so many different kinds of surgeons and different ways to approach things. I just have my own very firm standard ethics around it and how I like to approach things. And I've been blessed, I'd say like truly blessed to attract patients that fit that vibe. And I'm like, it really is, I feel like patients find me because we're on the same wavelength. And each surgeon is different. So sometimes they'll attract patients that want a different look or a different vibe, and that works for them. I think generally though, for peace of mind as a surgeon and also for safety for a patient, the more you stick to that kind of ethic, the better everybody is. You don't want to be doing surgery on somebody that is going to be unhappy.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, well, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of people come to us, they have aesthetic goals. Very oftentimes that will be tied to some type of an event. You want to lose the 30 pound for the wedding's going to come and go. I want to stand on stage. I want to do a fitness competition. It's going to be October 30th. Awesome. That day is going to kind of come and go. You mentioned mindset, and I think it's one of the most important things to talk about because what I've noticed being in the industry for as long as I have is like you go to the wedding, you lost the 30 pounds. You feel great. What do you do the next day? You're a fitness competitor. You just took yourself to the leanest possible version of yourself you can be, the most tan, the most ripped version. And now you're going to be starving. And the next day you're going to gain, 5, 10 pounds of water weight and feel like a cow. Like it's really complicated. And people have a lot of really interesting psychological, kind of things that they need to deal with. How do you help people with that mindset of like, we're going to alter this. You're going to look a little bit different. But if you don't really work on your mindset, it might not matter. You might not care, or you might not recognize what you did, what you spent your money on, what you took a risk for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Casey, you hit on such an important point, which is part of the arc of surgery and why I think the concept of surgery as ceremony is so important, or the process of preparing your mind to meet the new body. Because I mean, we are basically operating these avatars. These are these like physical bodies that we operate throughout, like that we're using throughout our lives, and we change them all the time. We'll grow out our beard, we'll whiten our teeth, we'll lengthen our hair, we'll get a haircut or whatever. And those little tweaks are obviously less invasive than surgery, but they make us feel and look a certain way. And we get used to our avatar. We get used to the way that we look. And then when you go through something as profound as a physical change, be it through like months and months of dedicated diet, nutrition, lifestyle to achieve a certain aesthetic and function, or surgery, usually with working out, the mind has had this process of adapting to it, which is the daily dedication of getting up and going to the gym and doing the work. That is a mindset. The mindset for surgery is different because you can literally be one person today and decide to do surgery tomorrow, and you're still going to be operating. You're still going to have a lot of the same operating system. And so, one of the things I do in my practice is I offer patients the opportunity to work with a therapist just before their surgery for about a week to drop into the mindset of who they will be, how they will feel, and where they're headed in terms of their mind and body connection after surgery. Because the body's going to change. Is the mind going to meet it there? And the body doesn't just change immediately for the better. Right after surgery, there's a thing known as the plastic surgery blues. So patients are often they're in pain, they're down, they're overall pretty like the life has been kind of turned upside down the first week after surgery. And the plastic surgery blues is a real thing. So the mindset not only has to get you through that initial period, but also as you're healing and getting to the body that you want. And the idea behind surgery ceremony is to create it's a protocol and awareness for patients to have a process to build up that mental fortitude to be in the best mental shape possible as they go into surgery. Surgery should really be a hell yes, not like I think I'm doing it tomorrow. And there's an interesting book called Psycho-Cybernetic by Maxwell Maltz. It's a plastic surgeon in the 60s who's kind of this bedside psychologist. And he noticed patients that have a more positive, strong mental framework going into surgery always have a better result. They're happier with their outcome and they in general look and feel better. And I think it's the same. I think the world of fitness and nutrition is that also, but it's a daily act built up over months instead of like an overnight surgery. So I'm glad you asked the question because I never really thought about it that way. But the mindset is extremely important, and I hope that more surgeons incorporate that awareness that psychology is a huge part of the work that we do, and supporting patients in that respect is also really important.
Got it. Do you notice a lot of success when you are talking to somebody about, again, a fitness routine, a nutrition routine? Like there's things that you are going to have to do. It's going to require effort. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take time. People don't have a lot of time. Like, do you notice that people can then settle into a better rhythm with
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I tell my patients all the time because a lot of the type of surgery I do is it's really moving and sculpting fat around the body with the intention of having a better aesthetic of the body as well as feeling and looking better. So I tell patients all the time after surgery, like we're not done. It's not just a one-time done thing. Like you have to maintain your diet and lifestyle, and the best results come with pairing this surgery with really committed diet and exercise. Like I'm like, well, I can bring you to an 8 or a 9, and then that last little bit of work comes from working together. And I try to frame surgery as like a booster rocket to get you to that place. And so a lot of patients, especially male patients that come see me, like they do the procedure and then they feel and look better. And as they're healing, they're like, I've the surgery itself was this like keystone moment that is enabling me to really stay on top of my diet and exercise and to have the best shape possible.
Got it. Maybe this is a poor analogy, but I think of it almost as like a bodybuilder taking testosterone or something. I don't know, people taking GLP-1 drugs to try to reduce their weight. Like this is nice. This is that booster rocket. This is going to help you. But if you don't kind of still follow the system, you can take as much testosterone as you want. If you're not in the gym lifting weights, it's probably not going
Exactly.
to have the same effect. If you're not
Yeah.
changing your habits and behaviors, that GLP-1 is going to have certain side effects. You're going to lose lean muscle mass. So there's other things that are going to happen that are not going to be as favorable as a result as, compared to you use this and then also change habits on the back end.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it. I really like that. Okay, let's talk about the different types of surgeries that you do most commonly. We talked about breast augmentation, which I definitely want to talk about, explant, and all of that. I think that's really becoming much greater in the awareness of a lot of people. But how do you? I don't know if you put them in different buckets, or how do you describe the different kinds of surgeries aesthetically that you do for most people?
Sorry, cut out for a sec. So I'm just making sure I'm still with you. Yeah, okay, got it. So yeah, the types of surgery I focus on breast and body, and specifically, I do a type of procedure. I either remove breast implants from women who are having trouble or no longer want their implants, and the other surgery I do is I replace it with fat. So implants out, fat in is the most easy way to describe it. But um, in and I'll kind of break it down each. So the breast explant surgery is in service of a patient population who have either just don't want their implants anymore or are having health or illness related to their implants because implants themselves can cause a strong inflammatory reaction. So I remove the implants. Once the implant is removed, often a surgery needs to be done. It's called a breast lift. So it's basically reconstructing the breast to regain the shape and form. So it's aesthetic and also functional. So it's comfortable to be in your own skin. After the breast implant is removed and the skin is reshaped, I also do a fat transfer procedure. So I do not use implants. I've stopped using implants for over a decade because I don't think they're safe. And it was a stand for basically for women's health, but also to focus on a safer natural alternative, which is fat grafting. Fat grafting is the second big category of surgery that I do. And with fat grafting, it's kind of like a 2-for-1 procedure because I have to get the fat from somewhere. So that involves high definition liposculpting. So I'm able to shape and move fat from one part of the body to somewhere else. And I do that with liposuction. So it's literally sculpting the body. I do it mostly awake And for patients, the reason I do that is threefold. One, it's safer than undergoing general anesthesia. Two, the patients have an easier and faster recovery afterwards because they're not recovering from medication from general anesthesia. And three, I find I can get better results because I'm able to sculpt to the natural muscle anatomy as opposed to when you're fully asleep, the muscle tone goes away. So fat grafting involves essentially two parts. It's sculpting the body and removing the fat from one part, and then once that fat is collected and harvested, I can then use it as a sculpting medium, literally like a tool that I can sculpt with, and I can put fat just about anywhere. The most common place I put it is the breast as an alternative for implants, but I also use it instead of implants for patients who want to avoid implants or after breast cancer for women who've had breast cancer to reconstruct the breast. Fat can also go in the hands, it can also go in the face, and it can also, a common area also is the buttock.
Wow, that's very interesting. Liposuction in particular, you hear horror stories about it. What are some of the side effects? You're describing a different method than anything I've ever heard. I'm certainly not an expert, but like, what are some of the horror stories you hear, and maybe where do you separate like the myths versus the facts about
Great
liposuction?
question. Yeah. And, liposuction is actually, I would say, one of the more dangerous plastic surgery procedures out there. The reason is because it's often not, many times the people performing liposuction are not board certified plastic surgeons. And which is, it's a whole nother side conversation, but I'll just say this briefly. There's very few medical specialties where you could not be board certified in and still perform it. For example, I can't just randomly go do heart surgery on a Tuesday, but a dermatologist or a pediatrician or gynecologist could actually get privileged to do liposuction in the hospital,
Wow.
which is unusual, but it's just the way the aesthetic cosmetic surgery world has evolved. So the reason liposuction is more dangerous because, first of all, there's a lot of people who aren't trained properly in doing it. But even among the people that are trained and board certified in it, it's not what they do all day, every day. And like any skill, if it's not your core competency, it's likely that you may not be as proficient in it, and you may encounter complications more often. And those complications can be um, life-threatening, or they can be less life-threatening, but still really unfortunate for the patient. Like you can get sort of bad-looking results and things like that. So liposuction is essentially using a mechanical device with suction, literally suction to the wall. It's a negative pressure. And there's a number of different ways that it's done, but it will, with a vibration suction, remove little bits of fat over a large area. There's many different kinds of tools out there that do it, and there's many different ways to do it. Personally, the way I do it is it's awake liposuction with tumescent anesthesia. What that means is that patients are awake, they're medicated, so they're comfortable, and it's probably closer to something like going to having a major dental procedure than like full on like in major invasive abdominal surgery. And tumescent means that I numb the skin and all the layer of fat between the skin and the muscle. And once that area is numbed, it's very easy to work in that plane and remove fat and tissue from there. And the tools that I use they're literally like these little sculpting tools. Like they take out little tiny bits of fat over a large area. And with the combination of vision, so where I'm looking, the feel of my hand, also knowing the anatomy, I'm able to sculpt and create a shape in the body.
Wow, that's fascinating. I've also heard, again, horror story with liposuction, wherever you remove the fat will kind of gather around the area a little bit differently when you regain fat. That's a whole nother
Yeah,
thing that we're talking about.
that's a valid myth, and I say with all of these myths, there's some kernels of truth, but then the reality it's in the details. So there's some truth to that, but not really, and I don't see that in my practice, and I'll explain why. So anywhere I remove fat from, that fat is gone forever. But fat cells have an almost infinite capacity to grow and expand. So whatever fat cells remain can still grow. What you're describing is between an area that's treated and not treated, if the fat gets removed from one area and not from this other area, there's going to be like a disparity. There's going to be a difference in size. And if that area is not blended, there can be a shelf. And so when fat grows and changes afterwards, it can appear that there's like a bump. The technical thing that I do is it's called blending. So once you finish treating a certain area, you blend into the area that hasn't been treated before and to create more curve and continuity. So it's not like a step off, it's not like a step, it's more like a continuous regular plane. But fat's not that smart. Fat doesn't selectively go to one part of the body after it's been treated. It still just goes everywhere. So that's the myth busted.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. My wife had the opportunity to do two separate cadaver classes where they were given, bodies, frozen bodies, and cadaver tools with Tom Myers, who wrote Anatomy Trains, to be able to dissect
Cool.
bodies and like really get into the body. And she said one of the things that surprised her the most is how little muscle tissue you actually have and how much fat tissue you have. Like
Yeah.
even with this cachexic woman who had passed away from cancer in her 70s, she said she could not believe how much lipid was on a body.
Yeah, it covers every square inch of your body from your head to toe under your skin. There's fat. There's a fat layer just about everywhere,
Wow.
even under the scalp before you hit your
Wow.
skull. There's still a thin layer of fat.
It's fascinating. Okay, like I said in the beginning, I really wanted to talk to you about breast implant illness. What happened? How did this start? I've noticed it more and more. I think I started paying attention to it when maybe it was like Danica Patrick, I think was the first
Yeah,
one that I noticed that came out really publicly about, her experience, what she was noticing. How do we get ourselves to this spot where we're in today where a lot of women are actually wanting to take their implants out?
yeah. So story time. This starts back in the 80s. So
I
I'll
was
take you.
hoping for a history
Yeah,
lesson. This is
yeah.
good.
I'll take you from the 80s up until my time, and then my time going forward. So in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a group of rheumatologists. So those are joint autoimmune doctors. They started to notice that a certain number of patients with breast implants were having something called ASIA. Forgive me if I forget the exact mnemonic or acronym, but it's autoimmune syndrome associated basically with silicone. And these doctors were noticing that patients with implants were having increased amount of symptoms associated with autoimmune illness, anything from thyroid disorders, hypothyroid, Sjogren's disease, rheumatoid arthritis. And basically, the symptoms would be things like dry eyes, joint pain, fatigue, hair loss, skin issues, and even some psychological, psychiatric issues. Around that time, they published a big study and said implants aren't safe. The FDA came in and put a moratorium. They said no silicone implants anymore. And the implant companies at that time, this was I think it was called the Dow Corning Corporation. There's a funny movie about this in the 70s. But they responded by creating saline-filled implants. Saline-filled implants are silicone implants with a silicone shell, but instead of being filled with silicone, they're filled with saline. And then, so they came back on the market in the like late 90s, early 2000s, and then kind of business as usual. And then all these different kinds of implants started coming out. Essentially, implant technology hasn't really changed. And I'm sure implant companies would love to debate me on this, but the reality is the biology hasn't changed, which is as soon as you put a foreign body inside a human, there is a foreign body reaction. The body walls off the capsule of the implant with this immune wall of cells. And then there's an immune reaction to it. And whether or not it's a strong immune reaction or low immune reaction, the body's still reacting to it, and patients have to, their bodies can do what it's going to do. And either it can present as something called capsular contracture, which is a really thick, painful encapsulation of the implant, or patients likely develop some kind of reaction to it known as BII or SBII nowadays, but it's just a bunch of different acronyms that all mean the same thing, some sort of autoimmune physiological response to the implant. Or in the worst case scenario is something called, it's a rare type of cancer associated with implants known as BIAALCL, breast implant associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma. It was those three reasons that I decided I'm done doing implants. I don't want to do this anymore. This is an elective procedure for cosmetic purposes, and there's absolutely no reason to potentially put somebody at a 30% risk of having a serious complication and a 100% guarantee that they're going to need a surgery later in life. This is something enough surgeons don't talk about. When you place an implant, you are 100% guaranteeing that patient another surgery in life, whether it's to remove the implant or adjust it for complication later. Patients will need a surgery again at some point later to deal with that implant. Very, very few patients go their entire lives with their implants. So, 100% might be a little bit overstepping, but I would say high 90s. Very, very high likelihood somebody's going to need implant surgery, a second one later in life. So this is the 1980s, 1990s, the moratorium, breast implants come back with silicone shell. Then enter the early 2000s, or I'd say like 2010, 2015, which is when this rare type of cancer is discovered with implants. I was a surgeon by the name of Gary Brody. I remember very well. I was in Vancouver at a plastic surgery meeting, and he published the first findings, and it was like a mic drop at a plastic surgery conference. I mean, we're talking about niche stuff. Nobody really cares or knows about these things, but in the plastic surgery world, it's a big deal. This plastic surgeon gets on stage. He's been around for decades, and he says, this is a case series, meaning I've a series of like 5 to 10 patients I've noticed with this rare type of cancer associated with implants. And in my mind, a light bulb went off. I said, I mean, if this is what he's reporting, there's how many unreported cases are there? And this is just the tip of the iceberg. there's going to be like a tsunami of patients that have this. So fast forward to 2018, when I'm finishing my fellowship and training, I had it was about five patients that came in the same day, all reporting symptoms from their implants. And up until that point, the response from the plastic surgery community was that patients are basically making it up. It's a psychosomatic. It's not a real thing. These are vague symptoms. Implants are safe. They've been heavily studied for decades. This is not a thing. And at that point, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm just going to stop doing implants until it can be better figured out. I will focus my practice on removing implants and doing fat transfer. So let's make an alternative better than implants that's safe and using your own natural tissues, which is fat. So I have an implant to show you. And this is fast forward from the 80s to 90s to today. And I'm going to share with you what grinds my gears about the implant technology world today. So this is a Motiva implant, the latest technology, the latest, greatest. And I don't mean to say anything poor about the hard work and scientists that put this together. This is clearly their life's work. But still, as a surgeon and somebody who's very good at implants, this is no better. This is no better. This is still a foreign body that goes inside. They've done something to change the texture of the implant to make it less likely to react. But in my opinion, the fundamental biology hasn't changed. The physics of the universe hasn't changed. This is still an implant that's going to go in the body, and there's going to be a reaction to it, and the patients are still going to have symptoms. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but it will take a few decades before we have the proper research to show it, and biology hasn't changed. The other thing that really bothers me about this is that as these newer implants have come out, the trend is to make them smaller and smaller and to say, hey, we'll put a smaller and smaller implant in. To me, that's funny for two reasons. One, you can easily achieve a small implant with fat, which is a safe, natural alternative. So why put somebody through implant surgery if they're going to be getting this? And the second thing is, it reminds me of like doctors years ago promoting cigarettes, saying, "Oh, smoke the skinny ones; they're going to be better for you." Like it's just ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So I have some serious gripes about this, and I think it'll probably take a while before the entire community catches up. But there's absolutely no need to use implants. Of course, the aesthetic outcomes with implants and fat transfer are different, and in some cases, an implant is a aesthetically better option. But my mission as a surgeon is to keep pushing the frontier of fat transfer technology until it's what I think is it's already as good, but should be better than implants, and people don't choose them in the first place. So that's kind of the history lesson of 80s to today.
Absolutely fascinating. Wow, that is super, super interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing all of that. I didn't know most of that, all of it. Absolutely incredible. So I know we could probably spend an hour going over all the signs and symptoms that an implant is causing problems in somebody. It seems like it's all over the map. You mentioned it's inflammatory, so anything involved with autoimmunity is going to be on that list. What are some key distinctions that might make some women say, like, look, this my implants may be an issue for me?
So autoimmune issues related to an implant are still considered what's called a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning it's important to figure out that nothing else is going on that could be causing those symptoms apart from the implant. There's still no blood test that today or a definitive test that can say this is 100% your implant. So if you're experiencing any symptoms that are in the autoimmune category, so that's joint pain, fatigue, dry mouth, dry eyes, skin rashes, thyroid issues, any other endocrine organ issues, it's important to go see a doctor who can properly evaluate to make sure that there's not something else going on. Once all of those tests have been done, and if you have implants, it is possible that the implants are causing the problems. The reason is because silicone acts as what we know as an adjuvant in the body. It's the same thing in vaccines. It helps stimulate your immune system to have a reaction to something. And so if you have a baseline of any autoimmune issue and you have implants, it's likely that the implants are making it worse. So the symptoms that I mentioned are the most common ones. Unfortunately, there's a long list of symptoms, and they can be kind of vague and attributed to other things. So sometimes it's hard to be like, is it the implants, or is it, I didn't get enough sleep last night? Is it the implants, or is it, my allergy to dust? It's hard to know. But that being said, it has been observed enough to know that implants can definitely make those issues worse.
That was very well explained. It's a topic we've never really covered on this show and is really prevalent. So I really appreciate your thoughtful answers on that topic. I also wanted to know, do you do skin removal as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So skin removal, and especially in the world of GLP-1s nowadays, it's incredible. It's a miracle drug, but at the same time, it is causing an epidemic of loose and saggy skin for people, which is really hard. If you're out there putting in the time and work in the gym and getting the gains and losing the weight, rapid weight loss will create loose skin. And as far as the best technology today is still nothing beats fully removing the skin. Of course, you are replacing it with a scar. There are some interesting technologies that can help tighten the skin minimally invasively, but I also do skin removal. So that's including things like tummy tuck, arm lift, thigh lift. Basically, a tuck anywhere in the body is removing some skin.
Got it. Okay. There's a couple in my kind of nutrition space that both found, low carbohydrate diets. They ended up losing a ton of weight. I think they did it in a really good way, and they had excess skin. I often see that, if somebody's doing a bit of like fasting, they're activating autophagy, they might be able to retain some of the skin and not have as much sagging skin. And everybody in our community was like, well, you need to fast more. You need to do this. You need to do that. And she kept explaining to people, like, look, like I have a pouch in front of me. I can't even wear the clothes that I want to wear. I have to like tuck this in a certain way. It's not just aesthetic, which the aesthetic is not great. It's also very practical and real and something I
Yeah,
and my husband have to deal with every day. And so I hope there's not too much judgment out there for people that decide to take that step, because it's an important step. And again, it's not just that it looks a certain way. It's not just aesthetic. There are way more things to consider, and they're way happier now.
absolutely. And you touched on the point. It can be a functional issue. For people who have a lot of rapid weight loss, especially if they have loose hanging skin in the front, that's called a pannus, Pannus, and that's the medical term for it. And what can happen is it creates a fold in the skin. It stays dark and moist there, and often you can get repeated infections, skin infections. It can be really uncomfortable. And after losing a lot of weight and wanting to be in the best shape possible, like often doing something like a tummy tuck or a skin excision can really help. It fixes the problem.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I wanted to wrap up by asking you a few like lifestyle questions. I had some questions for you about your own diet, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
Surgery in general, we can say surgery in general, in particular plastic surgery, the people that recover the best, the fastest, I assume would have been prioritizing their health prior to the surgery. In your opinion, is that true? And second of all, what things does that entail for you? What would your priorities be to somebody that's saying, I'm considering this, I want to make sure I'm healthy and in the right mindset first? What should I do?
Absolutely. So I encourage my patients to have, you're right. I notice the patients that have a really solid foundation in nutrition and health beforehand. Like if they're fit beforehand, they're going to do great afterwards. I have a protocol for patients before and after surgery to help them optimize their healing. Generally, after surgery, it's like your body's run a marathon every day. Even though you're not physically active, metabolically, the demands of all the tissue healing that's happening is your body's burning calories, and it's important to maintain. It's not the time to lose weight right after surgery. I encourage patients to have a high protein diet, at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. And the protein sources, it could be plant or animal protein, but ideally whole protein, and minimize any processed foods as much as possible. I encourage patients to do a whole food as much minimally processed diet, and to minimize salt as well afterwards, because there's a lot of swelling that happens, so you don't want to be too heavy on salt. Having a strong foundation before surgery means you're likely going to have the same principles afterwards, so it's just good. Patients with higher muscle mass tend to just have more metabolic reserve that they can tap into. So even if you lose a little bit of muscle after surgery, your body has these reserves of energy. I also encourage patients to do other things like things that I've added to my practice, like hyperbaric oxygen is very helpful for wound healing. Red light therapy is very helpful for, especially when I'm doing fat or tissue grafting. And lymphatic massage is essential. Like all these things, they all play into each other. And ultimately, it's you want to optimize the nutrition coming in that your body's using to repair, and you want to minimize the physical and mental stress as you're in the healing process.
Yeah, amazing. If somebody asked me one nutrition tip that would work for most people, it would be exactly that. Make sure you're eating a high protein diet of whatever kind, animal, plant source, whatever you can find, whatever fits for you. One of the episodes that I listened to you were interviewed a few years ago, so it's a little bit dated. I'm not sure if you're still doing it. Are you still a practicing vegan?
I am no longer practicing vegan. I was a fully plant-based for 10 years, and then in the past years or so, I've introduced some eggs and dairy into my diet, and once in a while meat. I still prioritize a plant-based diet above everything. I think it's overall for a number of reasons. Health, welfare for animals, welfare for the planet. I think it's better. But I have introduced meat back into my diet.
Got it. Do
Yeah.
you mind if I ask you how that process has gone?
Sure. I still struggle with it from time to time because the reason I was plant-based vegan in the first place was not for health reasons or for environment, it was for animal welfare. I strongly
Yes.
thought the animal farming industry is horrible and there's absolutely no need to eat as much meat as we do. And I still believe that. The transition for me, part of it was um, the my immediate next door neighbor has chickens, and I was helping him tend to his chickens one day, and his like this is in the mountains in Topanga, and he just had a bunch of spare eggs, and he said, "Would you like to try some?" And at that moment, I really did. So it was just kind of it's hard to describe. It was just a bit of a mental shift. I still think overall factory farming is terrible, and the closer we are connected to our food, from everything from knowing exactly where our food sources are from, understanding also that we are part of this bigger ecology ecosystem. We're not just people at a grocery store with cash in our hands. We're part of a planet that relies on our interaction with it, and just not over consuming. So that's sort of the bigger arc. But from a health perspective, I haven't actually noticed a huge shift. I wouldn't say that
Okay.
since started eating meat, I feel significantly better. The biggest difference for me, health-wise, fitness-wise, has been making sure I take enough creatine and protein. Yeah, those two things single-handedly, when I started really tracking my macros to that extent of making sure I was getting at least 1 gram per pound of body weight, and I still mostly eat plant-based protein in my protein shakes. Um, I was like, I feel great. I was getting enough and sleep. So getting enough sleep, creatine made a huge difference for my energy levels and the way my body looks and the way I work out, and just getting enough protein. Um, I do find the portion sizes have gotten a little smaller. I do get fuller on less overall volume. When I was plant-based, I was eating like I loved it, but I was basically eating like a huge salad bowl of with every meal,
Right.
and I was yeah to get the calories in. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did not prepare you for these questions. I really appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, of
You're
course.
talking to somebody who's been on a carnivore diet for almost 7 years now. A large portion of our audience also chooses a very high animal-based kind of diet. I was going to ask you, and you answered the question, why were you vegan? And we had a former guest that was fully vegan, is now like like fully carnivorous. Have this answer that I thought was so beautiful. Like whatever reason you answer that you're a vegan, I'm gonna love. I'm gonna love that you're doing it for that reason. And in that way, I never thought that like vegans were over here and carnivores were over here and we were exact opposites. We're people that care about our food. And the number of people that we've had come on this show to talk about animal agriculture and the things that we need to deal with and the methane and the water and the land use and how can we make regenerative systems and how can we put that in place. I think it's amazing that you were able to do it for as long as you were and that you were open minded to try a few eggs. I've always made, kind of as weird as it sounds, I've always made the argument that like a vegan could probably still be a vegan and include eggs because that's never going to be like a chicken the way we think it is. Because it's not getting fertilized. But yeah, I really appreciate you opening up about your kind of experience. And like you said, like you're having a little bit more, the volume's a little bit down, but other than that, it's not like hugely different.
I haven't, I mean, I think overall, if you look at population level studies of what is less inflammatory and healthier, I think if you do a carnivore diet or a plant-based diet, if you do it like peak health, like minimize, like if you do it really properly, I think you're probably going to do well regardless. What seems to be the differentiator is either of those diets not done properly. Like, there's a lot of crappy vegan food out there, and there's also a lot of crappy just meat food. So,
Totally.
um, uh, I do think that from what I remember reading the research, because I followed it pretty heavily at the time, is at a population level scale, a mostly plant-based diet seems to be healthier overall. But it's just so hard to control. It's so hard to know and control specifically for all the factors. But I do think nature is very intelligent and has created this incredible pharmacy for us and colorful foods, including all the plants and vegetables out there. And it's literally medicine. When you break down the flavonoids and all the components that are in the vegetables and the fruits and the berries, I mean, like that's the pharmacy that we want to be eating. And then animal protein is interesting because it acts as an aggregate of all of those proteins. Like all of those nutrients get hyper concentrated in animal protein. So I ultimately I think nature is the greatest teacher and has created this intelligence system for us to survive for a long time. Um, yeah, plants are great.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm
yeah.
I'm saving the plants for you, so you can have as many as you like. I love that. I absolutely love that answer, and I really appreciate building bridges. When it comes to that kind of thing. And like I said, I think we've got way more in common than we have differences as far as that kind of thing. And you mentioned nutrition science, dude. You're absolutely right. There's no way we can do randomized controlled trials for some of these things. We're just not going to know. And I'll always remember a conference that I was at where the speaker got up and said, like, what is the best trial that anybody can do, the best, highest quality. And everybody in the audience is like, yeah, it's a randomized control trial, double blind, blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, it's an N of one when you're the one, when you are the person that's going through this and testing things out. That's the most important because it's the most important to you. You know how best you're going to feel, and nobody else is going to be able to tell you.
Love that. It also
I
gives
did
so
too.
much. It's great because at the end of the day, you know, yeah, we can care about the planet and humanity, but at the end of the day, when you're researching any of these things, it's for how is this going to change how I feel, and ultimately finding the thing that fits you the best. The end of one actually does make a lot of sense, and it supports the all the bro biohacker body scientists, which lately I love. Like some of the research that is coming out from the stuff that Brian Johnson's doing, and all these other sort of like call them more. It's I do think it's legitimate science at this point, the level of data and amount of stuff that's been gathered, but it is a lot of it is an N of one, and it just kind of shows you like, well, randomized controlled trials can only do so much. At the end of the day, it's how do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think your work is so important by bringing in things like mindset, spirituality, all these other things to, again, what I would have not considered prior to opening that email and hosting on the show. So I really appreciate all the amazing work that you do, and what a wonderful nuanced conversation this was. I'm so grateful for you to come on our show. Dr. Kanevsky, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Best place is on Instagram, my social media. So for Instagram, I'm drjohn.k. That's at drjon.k. And you can reach me through there anytime. I've got a lot of information. Also, you can see my website on there. And yeah, I'm happy to chat anytime. Please reach out. Any questions, whether it's health, whether it's surgery, tech, longevity, all that stuff, all topics I find interesting.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. We will be sure to link that in the show notes so people can find it easily. But for now, Dr. KFC, thank you so very much. Again, you're bringing such a cool kind of vibe to a really important conversation and getting some awareness out there. So we really appreciate it. Really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to be on our show today.
Casey, thank you so much for hosting me. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, it was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.